esteemed panel of experts to talk about what's going on with the telecom space. TV Ramachandran, President of Broadband India Forum, an independent telecom consultant. We've got Naveen Kulkarni from Reliance Securities and Kunal, Bajaj telecom expert as well joining in. Gentlemen, morning. Naveen, let me start off with you first. Balance sheet repairs are clearly underway for the incumbents. Do you see this as a sign of pressure easing on their P&Ls?
See, the balance sheet repairing was essentially not an option for the incumbents, which is Bharti Airtel and Vodafone Idea Cellular. So it had to be done, right? Because every quarter these companies are making losses. Second aspect is the capex requirements are quite substantial. Apart from that, the third aspect which the incumbents are have still shied away is from having a comprehensive bundle handset bundling strategy, right? So which also might be a very big challenge to overcome in the market. So that product gap still exists from the incumbents perspective. So our opinion is the kind of equity infusion that we are seeing for the incumbent players, it was something which had to be done. Right, so and they are doing it now. For Vodafone Idea, the challenges were much higher. For Bharti, it was little lesser because Bharti has other assets also to monetize, right, which include Africa, and Bharti Infratel is still a substantial asset. But these things had to be done. There was not many options that were left on the table for the incumbents, so they have taken the requisite measures now.
My simple follow-up question, Naveen, here would be that are telecom companies currently underestimating that how the dynamics of the data market will change and what Reliance Jio is really capable of gaining and creating, both in terms of an ecosystem and also in terms of an experience? Because Bharti will still, or Bharti and Voda Idea and Vodafone, they will not be able to create the unmanageable ecosystem what Reliance Jio suddenly is trying to create. I mean, they are trying to create an Apple experience in India which others cannot provide.
Yes, so there could be some bit of underestimation happening in terms of the subscriber acquisition strategy, right? So let's look at it this way. If I were to look at the key operating parameters in terms of number of data customers, let's say that Bharti has or Vodafone Idea have, right? So that's still substantial. Second is the amount of data which is being consumed, right? On Bharti's network, the per subscriber 4G subscriber is consuming close to 10 GB data, which is not very different from what Jio is providing, right? So from that perspective, the gap has been bridged. So the network capacity gap, right? And second thing is that customers consuming that much amount of data. So some gaps are still bridged, but going ahead, what's going to happen is in terms of subscriber acquisition, if Jio keeps picking up subscribers from Idea, Vodafone and Bharti Airtel, then the ARPU improvement is not likely to happen, right? So that's going to be a big challenge, because now the ARPU sensitivity for all the telecom players is going to be a lot dependent on how many subscribers are either on bundled plans or on let's say a handset plan, right? So that's going to be a very critical factor going ahead, because the bulk of the voice usage subscriber which the telecom operators had, the ARPU was very insignificant, and the postpaid ARPU has come down quite a bit, right? And the data prices have crashed. So there's so many things which have happened. So that is going to be the key factor from here on, right? So that's a long-term challenge that these companies will have to address, right? So whether it is ecosystem in terms of the content, right, or handset bundling, or
sure,
those are the key factors.
Yeah, you really brought up that point with respect to ARPU. Mr. Ramachandran, I'd like to get in your perspective as well. Incumbents have been trying to weed out low-end users. We've seen a substantial exodus. Will this impact revenues going forward, or will it improve the per-user parameters and that compensate for the loss?
Thank you. That's a very good question. My view is that clearly, first of all, I would like to say that I would think that the worst is over, future is going to be bright for Indian Telecom. From where we were 12 to 14 segments of the market, today we are down to 3 to 4. The famous rule of 3 of Professor Jagdish Seth has come to being in India. So that's got to produce results. The question is in what time frame. I believe that some of the short-term tactics which are being adopted by some of the players of trying to improve the ARPU by exiting the marginal users may not really be good in the long run. One has to be a little patient. See, the days of just looking at ARPU are over. Recently I read an industry expert talking about this, and I fully agree with that the days of talking only about ARPU or only about subscriber number are over. We have to look at the holistic position. And the holistic position is determined by the entire system, the entire ecosystem of subscribers. Whether it is, you talk of the famous rule of 80-20 or marginal users, you have to accommodate all, your system has to cater to all. Because going forward, what is going to happen on the data explosion, I don't think we are still aware of to the fullest extent. I tend to slightly disagree with the earlier speaker that we are probably now catching on to what the data is going to happen, the gaps are bridging. No, I don't think so. The growth in future is going to be enormous in India, particularly with the video. You know, only 40% of the rural is net connected, but 60 to 70% of our video traffic is coming from there. Can you imagine what's going to happen when that rural connectivity is going to increase from 40%? So we are still underestimating what can happen on the data push. I think we need to have all subscribers on board, not just the higher ARPU ones. We have to have packages to deal with various people, various market subsects, and in the long run, we need a patience. I think the pricing power will return to some extent, but not significantly. If you judge by merely the ARPU slight increase quarter from quarter, I think you may go wrong. I think the pricing power increase is going to be only small, it's not going to be great. What's more important for the sustainability of the system is going to be the huge economies of scale that are going to result. From a consolidated market of 3 or 4, the economies of scale are what are going to help the operators, the players.
In fact, let me get Kunal as well in on the discussion. Kunal, we have seen ARPUs improve nonetheless, and that's happened in the third quarter too, because of the minimum balance introduction. Now, experts believe that this rise is going to continue in the Q4 as well. Would it be fair to say that ARPUs will see hikes without much tariff tweaks, or not quite?
So good morning. Before I answer that question, I think I'd like to agree with what Mr. Ramachandran was saying earlier. I mean, ARPU and subscriber numbers have been these vanity numbers that have been used. Basically, they were very relevant in the voice sort of era when you had a situation where the number of minutes that a particular user could consume was quite measured and quite limited. And the growth month on month, quarter on quarter was really limited by the number of minutes someone has in a day and how many minutes they're actually able to speak on the phone. When we move to a data era, it's not, the ARPU is not going to be the only thing that we look at, because you get into a situation where there's exponential growth month on month. We've never seen total voice consumed on the entire Indian telecom network ever grow at the pace at which data has grown in the past 3 years. And there's no signs of that abating because, again, like Mr. Ramachandran said earlier, we're still just scratching the surface in terms of how many people are actually joining the data network. As we expand 4G networks out to rural areas, the amount of data that they will consume will also continue to go up, as well as the number of subscribers that will be joining the network. So I think the view on the economics needs to change, because what you get is today you have a very dense population in urban centers where networks are starting to struggle to meet up with the capacity demands. But that's being balanced out by the fact that a huge amount of capacity is being created in suburban and rural areas where users are coming onto 4G networks for the first time and their consumption is going up. So while ARPUs from a pure averaging perspective, because lower end users are basically being disinvited out of the ecosystem, and lower end users are finally starting to attach onto data plans, which in themselves have a higher ARPU. So from an averaging perspective, you may see that going up, but I don't see that as a sign of regaining strength from the perspective of data pricing or controlling data tariffs in the market, nor do I necessarily see that as the key metric that one should be looking at to look at the health.
Okay, Naveen Kulkarni, I'm just going to throw in one more ingredient in the melting pot, and if I'm just going to speak an outsider view from the standpoint of Reliance Jio may easily come back and said, look, I'm gaining market share, I will not increase prices, I want to go for market share gain. Rather than being the number 2 player, I want to be the number 1 player. I will think about pricing after 2 or 3 years when I have 35-40% market share. If Reliance decides to follow the aggressive pricing policy, what happens?
So, if we look at what the strategy that Reliance has, so they are clearly aiming at a very, very significantly higher market share, right? So, already in the 4G ecosystem, they have much higher market share. So, I don't think so their strategy is going to change much with regards to what they would want to achieve. They are looking at 50% market share. Whether they achieve that number or not is something which time will tell, but they would not be happy with a smaller, significantly smaller market share than the number that they are looking at. So that strategy is going to continue. But the important factor here is going to be what is the level of customer stickiness which each operator is going to enjoy, right? So if let's say that Bharti has managed to migrate most of its subscribers, or Vodafone is able to migrate most of its subscribers on a bundled plan with a significant amount of data, let's say 1 GB data a day plus unlimited voice usage, right? So that will definitely start increasing the customer stickiness and the movement from one operator to another operator. Once that stage is reached, I think then the market is likely to stabilize significantly. I do not see from that perspective whether there will be huge tariff cuts, right? So that could be a place where we could start seeing some bit of stability coming back into the system, and maybe revenues and EBITDA starting to move up even for the incumbents.
Right. Gentlemen, we'll let you go on that note. Thank you so much, Mr. Ramachandran, Naveen, as well as Kunal, for taking time out and joining in, giving us a heads up as to what the situation is, because this is definitely a sector which is of much interest.